Now time series. Time series often has found 4 components of indicating the fall in the prices and rises in terms of the tomato and onion prices. First is the trend, second is cycle, third is the seasonality, and fourth is irregularity. So first is trend, second is the cycle, third is the seasonality of production of tomato and onion, and fourth is regularity. So these 4 factors added in together to make the cycle of rise or fall in prices that are not fixed frequency and such representing the business cycle. First is the cycle, which represents the first business cycle. First is the trend, which indicates a long term rise and fall in the prices. Second is the cyclicity, which represents rise in the fall. And then third is the seasonality of fixed frequency, which occurs in Rabi season or Kharif season or which season. So this particular point in time during the year, which is seasonality of prices, could occur due to the seasonal pattern of products and commodities that are being produced in the market. यानी कि पहले ट्रेंड हम देखते हैं किसी भी चीज़ के क्रॉपिंग पैटर्न की, then there comes the cyclicity of its cultivation and production, then comes the seasonality in which season it is being grown, and the last is regularity, which shows the irregular component. It remains the time series for removing the trend, cycle and seasonal. Okay, this component is in magnitude, impact and durations of the unpredictable priority. So this shows the predictability of such components in the market, which leads to hike of price, leads to inflation overall. So we saw that all groups such as CPFI, CFPI 39.1, highest weightage of CFPI, which grew to December 2021 4.0, then food and beverages, which grew to 4.5, then cereals and products 2.6, and meat and fish 4.6, 3.8 in terms of milk products, 24.3 in terms of oil and fats, 3.5 in terms of fruits, pulses and products 2.4, 5.6 in terms of sugar and confectionery, 11.0 in terms of fuel and light. Again, remember this fact for your prelims as well as mains point of view. Now inflation rate year on year, how it is raised and how hike in oil and fats. So in April 2017 it was around 1, and it was a creeping kind of tendency up to May 2019, which again grew to a high rate of 35 and again a decline to 25. Now here we see that oil and fats, mustard oil, groundnut oil, refined oil and ghee. Fluctuation in mustard oil is quite high, highest price of mustard during lockdown. Then second highest was refined oil, around 30%. Then third rise was seen in the price of groundnut oil, which was around 10, and last was a ghee. So highest fluctuation in the prices was seen in terms of mustard oil first, then second highest was around refined, which were 30, then third was groundnut. Remember this order of preference So, with economic activity picking up in second lockdown 2021 and 2, aging with the global crude oil prices very high, the low base of 2021 led to WPI inflation reaching a peak of 14.2% in November 2021 and 12.5% during the April to December 2021. So पहले पीक में 14.2% देखा गया है WPI, which was very high, and next moderated to 12.5. Therefore, the high WPI based inflation rate in 2021 is largely attributed to low base of the preceding year. On the other hand, retail inflation that had remained high during 2020-2021 to supply chain disruption and high food inflation moderated in 21-22, accounting of the effective supply side management and resulting in the divergence between WPI and CPI. So, this is the main factor leading to divergence between WPI and CPI. So, earlier we were discussing about huge gap between WPI and CPI, which was WPI was at 12.5, CPI was 5.5. So, 6% gap was there, such shows a huge divergence. So, this is the reason of how the retail inflation leads to the huge divergence between these prices. Now, the next is the trend in food and non-food items. So, we see the food items such as vegetables, poultry products, milk products were quite high in prices, which lead to high in the prices of food and non-food items. So, in the trend we see that all commodities are at very low during the first lockdown in year 2019 and 20, then it grew to a level of 15%, and again at second point of time non-food manufactured were at quite high position. So, non-food products were around 12 to 13, then the food products were around 8. Now, this kind of tendency shows that the prices of food and non-food products were quite divergent during the lockdown situation, and it grew into the inflationary tendency. So, to augment the domestic availability of pulses, tur dal, urad dal kept under the import category till 31st March 2022. तो किस चीज़ों को बढ़ाया जा रहा है फ्रेंड्स? तुअर दाल, उड़द, and the basic import duty and agriculture infrastructure and development cess on the masoor have been brought down to 0 and 10% respectively. 0 to 10% तक रखा गया है मसूर. Now 5-year MOU has been signed with Myanmar, annual import of 2.5 limit, and तुअर विद द malawi के साथ तुअर दाल के लिए एग्रीमेंट किया है सरकार ने, एनुअल इंपोर्ट ऑफ 0.50 लिमिट ऑफ तुअर. देन MOU विथ मोजाम्बिक के साथ किस चीज़ के लिए एग्रीमेंट है? तुअर दाल के लिए, एंड फॉर एनुअल इंपोर्ट ऑफ 2 million metric ton of तुअर दाल फॉर 5 years. रिमेंबर दिस डेटा. म्यांमार के साथ कितने मेट्रिक टन का? 2.5. उड़द दाल के साथ 0.50, तुअर दाल के साथ, मोजाम्बिक के साथ 2 metric ton. Now edible oils. So edible oils were again at quite high position during the first and second lockdown period. Mustard oil, soya oil as well as bean oils were quite high. So we see that the refined palm oil and palmolene, refined soybean oil and the sunflower oil has been reduced to 17.5% from 32.5% with effect from the 14th October 2021. Then there was speculation and hoarding of this material, which lead to quite high rise in this inflationary tendency. Again, these are the reasons for rising inflation: importing of essential commodities, second, hoarding of this material, and third is the lack of logistic supply chain in the city. Now, future trading of mustard oil on NASDAQ has been suspended. मस्टर्ड की फ्यूचर ट्रेडिंग सस्पेंडेड हो गई है. That again raised to rise in price and inflationary tendency. IT in Department of Food and Public Distribution has imposed stock limit of edible oil and oilseed for a period of 31st March. The removal of licensing requirements, stock limits and movement restrictions and specification foodstuffs amendment order 2021 has been issued with effect of 8th October 2021. It has also been directed to ensure that edible oils and edible oilseeds stock is regularly declared and updated on the portal of Department of Food and Public Distribution. very important. कौन से वेबसाइट पे इनकी डेटाज अपडेट हो रहे हैं? डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ फूड एंड पब्लिक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन. देन प्रोडक्शन एंड अल्टरनेट्स. Government is taking steps to improve the production of secondary edible oils, especially rice bran oil, to reduce the import of dependency. Rice bran oil की improve production की जा रही है. Then soya meal include an essential commodity. Soya meal and soya milk was also added to essential commodity, which was in bid to cool down the domestic price of soya meal. Government has notified in order under. Now, long-term perspective of management of supply side factors. So friends, as we were discussing about the constraints of economic survey, and we were discussing about the inflation which causes various problems in the economy. So long term of economy inflation should be curtailed by checking the rise of food and beverages, which were comprising of huge part of the total surplus of demand and supply. So supply side factors having predominance in determination of inflation should be checked. So long term policy perspective deals with the checking of the prices of wheat and rice and reducing the prices of pulses which were being imported from the other countries. So we are also focusing on the self-reliance in terms of pulses and oil seeds, which are leading to assistance in the prices of such commodities. So shift in the procurement policy as well as the logistics policy, in which we are having a buffer stock of wheat and rice, and we are having a huge surplus in terms of wheat and rice. So government plans to shift the surplus from the wheat and rice to the oil seeds and pulses. Therefore, this economy survey mainly focus on the oil seeds and pulses development in terms to curtail the inflation. So such are the factors in terms of controlling the inflation and increase the production of pulses and oil seeds in various parts of the country in order to expand the productivity through high yielding variety seeds. कैसे high yielding variety seeds use की जा रही हैं, and how we are dealing with the development of pulses and the oil seeds. Now, second part is calibrated import policy. What can be the import policy which can be used by the government in order to reduce the problem of prices of such commodities such as pulses and edible oils through the frequent import duty, tariff revision, through providing immediate relief to the consumers in the way to lower prices, and wrong signals to the domestic of roads development, railways development, infrastructure, development of ports, airports, logistics, retail supply chain, and better productivity. Now, better storage and supply chain management is required to ensure availability in lean season and reduce wastage of horticulture and other perishable essential commodities to reduce seasonal spikes in the prices for consumers, glut for the farmers in times of good harvest due to lack of marketing infrastructure resulting in distress sales. So, we are catering the distress sales which are leading to the rise in inflationary tendency by essential commodities, horticulture products, food crops as well as essential products in the market. Now, looking in the next part, the pharmaceutical prices are also being controlled by the government of India. So, in COVID scenario, we saw that rises of the healthcare products as well as oxygen cylinder was quite high, remdesivir as well as the hydroxychloroquine and various essential medicines were at quite rise. So, in order to check the health conditions of supply chain of such pharmaceutical medicines, government of India subsidized these prices and the pharmaceuticals products has also been curtailed to a minimum level so that easy availability of essential medicines and oxygen cylinder was prevailed. So, government regulate pricing drugs to ensure availability and accessibility of medicines and affordable prices. Now, National Pharmaceutical Pricing Agency was also attached to the Office of Department of Pharmaceuticals and mandated to regulate the prices of drugs. This is very important. So, what were essential drugs? Hydroxychloroquine, and then oxygen cylinders, then remdesivir, and so on and so forth, which were very much important for the COVID scenario in order to curtail the COVID virus challenge. Now, what can be the questions asked for the mains examination of UPSC and other PCS? So, explain the term refined core inflation. What is refined core inflation, friends? We have already discussed in the previous slide that the headline inflation minus oil prices. This is called as refined core. Why do central banks often look at core inflation in addition to looking at inflation? Why do the central banks such as RBI and other government central banks are looking into the inflation in terms of the headline core inflation, rather core inflation? Discuss the impact of COVID-19 in inflation in India and the world. What is the impact of COVID-19 on inflation in India? What was the changes in WPI, CPI, and what was the changes in stagflation, and V-shaped recovery was taken. So, you can mention this in your question answer writing. You will introduce the answer via explaining some factors leading to inflation, then body should be guided by what are the processes that leads to inflationary tendency, and conclude with a futuristic way forward remark in order to make your answer more composite. Then why there is a big divergence between WPI and CPI based inflation rates in India in post-COVID scenario. So, what we saw that CPI was around 5.5, but the wholesale price index was around 12.5. So, there was a huge trough between WPI and CPI, that was 6%. So, how to handle such kind of question? So, introduce your question by explaining little details of inflation measures, inflationary tendency, and you can write in the body how government is taking such measures and what are the essential components which raised in the WPI, such as food, beverage and manufacturing goods, mining products and core sector which rises in the WPI, and what were the components in the CPI urban, CPI rural, which leads to rise in the CPI, which I already discussed in this lecture. So mention all these and then conclude with the way forward. Now next, so in this way we conclude this lecture and ending this class over here. I believe that you are getting whole perspective of economy survey very well, and you will include this data in order to cater your UPSC prelims as well as mains examination. Do all very best. Thank you and have a nice day. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.